afternoon. Thanks for joining us across the fence. I'm Keith Silva. Chances are good that in the coming months you'll be hearing about neonicotinoids, often shortened to neonics. This pesticide is generating a lot of concern about its impact on pollinator populations, specifically honeybees. Like all pesticides, neonics are toxic to insects, both bad and beneficial alike. But to what extent? That's the question environmental advocates, scientists, and policymakers want to know. The bees may have gone to bed, but the buzz on neonics continues to grow louder. To talk about neonicotinoids, pollinators, and policy, I'm joined by Brooke Decker from the Vermont Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets. Brooke is the Agency of Ag's Apiary Program Manager, and Stephen Dwinell, also from the Vermont Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets. Stephen is the Director of Public Health and Agricultural Resource Management Division. Thank you both for joining me today.
Happy to be here.
Great.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity.
Brooke, the first question is to you. Bee colonies are considered livestock. It should be no surprise, so therefore the Agency of Agriculture and Markets has an apiary program. But what's its purpose, Brooke?
Yeah, so the Vermont Apiary Program was first established about 100 years ago, and it was established to combat the biggest issue facing honeybees at the time, which was American foul brood, which is a highly contagious, fatal honeybee disease that spreads rapidly, or can spread rapidly. But over the years, the program has evolved and adapted to various pressures and changes that that the honeybees are facing. And right now, today, the biggest issue the honeybees are facing are a parasite called the varroa mite that causes a lot of issues with the honeybee.
And varroa mite, folks may have heard of that when people talk about colony collapse or issues with honeybees, the varroa mite is sometimes considered the source of those problems.
Yeah, sometimes, yeah. It's multifaceted, but yeah, there's
right.
Yeah, varroa mite is what we're seeing is a lot of the issues that we see in.
If it were only the little varroa mite, it might be an easier problem to solve. What does a pollinator health specialist do?
Yeah, so most beekeepers know me as the bee inspector, so not as fancy, but so really I wear many hats in this role, but primarily I administer the apiary program through the Agency of Agriculture, and that has three main components, one being registration, so all honeybees need to be registered. That's whether you have one colony in your backyard or you have thousands throughout the state and you're a honey producer. So all those need to be registered, and then there's apiary inspections that we're out there in the field looking in honeybee colonies, mitigating pests and diseases. And also there's some regulatory requirements along with those inspections, like if you're selling bees, for instance, they need that. And then another huge component that I spend a lot of time on is education and outreach, really, with working with beekeepers. Honeybee management is really difficult. There's a steep learning curve, so we work a lot with beekeepers on best management practices and how to keep healthy colonies.
Speaking of those colonies, how many apiaries or colonies are in Vermont?
There are currently about 17,000 colonies in Vermont. And that is an increase since 2016. Actually, there were about 9,000 colonies at that time. So that's a huge increase. That's about 43% increase.
Almost double, yeah.
Yeah, almost double. It's the highest number of colonies that we've had in the state on record. So to me, those numbers say that the beekeeping industry is really healthy and robust, and that our beekeepers are working hard to maintain healthy colonies and putting in the hard work to have viable businesses.
And Stephen, I see you nodding your head. Across the Fence in the past year has highlighted several community education and outreach efforts regarding pollinator habitats. And this is something that you're very big on, is increasing pollinator habitats.
Absolutely. Whenever we can make land use decisions that favor increasing wildlife and pollinator habitat, that's what we ought to be doing. And there's a lot of resources on that, and we're going to be working on more resources a lot with UVM on that. But yeah, we need to make land use decisions that support native and managed pollinators wherever we can.
And pollinators, whether it's a honeybee or a wild bee, they don't discriminate when it comes to where they get the pollen that they need or the nectar that they need. So any place where you have native plants or plants that favor pollinators, it's going to be a positive impact.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and we have lots of
a couple
opportunities.
lights in my classroom right
Okay.
now.
Yeah.
What are the threats to Vermont's honeybees? What are they susceptible to?
Yeah, I mean, like Steve talked about, habitat is really important for honeybees, and so over the years, with the Vermont's landscape changing, that has had an effect on honeybees, and then climate change has had an effect on honeybees and probably all pollinators, but though I like to talk about honeybees the most. Just thinking of the past few years, we've had drought conditions where the nectar resources are less available, and then all the way to flooding when then there's no nectar available in that case as well. So those are threats, and then also along with the climate change and the global economy, there's threats to invasive species. There's a threat of a new mite coming into North America, and so I'm hopefully going to learn about that before it gets here. There's invasive wasps that have made the news in Washington State and in Georgia. So there's a lot that can happen with those changes. And then also with this varroa mite, more research is leading to show that the viruses that are vectored by the varroa mite are more virulent, and there's just so much more research about that as well.
I'm also thinking that if you double the amount of honeybees, you're also going to double the amount of issues that can come up, whether it's pests or anything like that. You're going to increase population, you're going to increase the opportunity. Vectors, I like the word you used, right? Because that's the truth. And turning back to Stephen, so pesticides that are used in agriculture, are these a threat to honeybees?
Well, that's a pretty broad statement.
Sure.
So we have to really narrow it down. I mean, some pesticides are beneficial to bees. Beekeepers use pesticides to control the mites and
Good
the
point.
various other pests.
Yep.
And just looking across all the brands that are registered, most of them would have nothing to do with bees, and bees wouldn't be exposed and wouldn't be an issue for it. There are some pesticides that are used in agriculture and in other places that are toxic to bees. Or insecticides generally will be toxic to bees because they're insects. There are some that are classified as highly toxic to bees, and those materials have to be used very carefully. There are specific instructions on how they have to be used. We have rules in place that have to be followed in our pesticide rule. So yeah, they can be an issue for bees if they're not used properly.
And these neonicotinoids, those are one of those pesticides that are, there's specific rules and all sorts of things when it comes to that.
They are classified as highly toxic
Okay.
to bees, honeybees, and presumably to some of the other pollinators too, the native bees. So yeah, there are specific requirements for how they have to be used. In Vermont, all the outdoor uses of neonicotinoids are classified as restricted use. So they can only be used by certified applicators, people who have been licensed and certified by the agency.
Yep, and there are programs where people get licensed to use these pesticides. UVM Extension is one of those people who works with that along with the agency. What influence does the Agency of Ag regulate apiary programs to monitor and legislate this pesticide use?
Well, we're the state lead agency for the regulation of pesticides in Vermont, in the state. The regulation of pesticides is shared equally between the federal government and state governments. That's written into the federal pesticide law. And so we're the state lead agency. So we're responsible for registering pesticides for use in the state, sale and use in the state. We're responsible for licensing and certifying applicators for the folks who use pesticides for which they have to be certified to use. We're responsible for inspecting applicators, make sure they're following the law and the rules. We investigate complaints. We do monitoring for pesticides in the environment, so the whole thing.
As a little civics lesson here, the agency is not legislating. You're not writing laws.
No, we don't. The General Assembly writes the laws.
Right.
We adopt the rules to implement the laws, and then we enforce the rules.
Talk to me about the Vermont Educational Innovation Board. What is that?
Oh, the agricultural?
Agricultural, I'm sorry.
Mixing programs.
Yes.
No, so the Agricultural Innovation Board is established by the legislature in 2021, and it was designed and designated to look at specific issues dealing with agriculture and the environment. Some pesticide related, some not pesticide related. But one of the big focuses for that board has been the issue of neonicotinoid treated seeds. There are 13 individuals designated by the legislature, appointed by the secretary. Been meeting since 2022. So far, the board has had 17, sorry, getting my numbers wrong here, 17 public meetings dealing with neonicotinoid treated seeds. We've heard from a range of experts on all the different aspects of the pest control needs for the farmers, the seed availability, the types of pests that are being controlled, economic thresholds, environmental impacts, human health impacts, all that's been taken together. And so what the board has come to after evaluating all that is a recognition that we need to learn more about how to manage this in Vermont. Okay. So there are potential impacts from the use of the seed. There are also benefits from the use of the seed. And so how do we put that together? And what the board has come to is a recommendation to work closely with UVM, actually, to do some more research about how to mitigate any potential impacts in Vermont, and also to improve pollinator habitat, like you were just talking about. Because that's for a lot of reasons, that's the main solution. Is we need to mitigate any potential impacts from any of the pesticide use or any of the practices in agriculture when it comes to pollinators. But we also need to look for ways to improve pollinator. Like Brooke was just saying, there are lots of things going on. Climate change, land use changes, various practices that people have. So whenever we have an option to make land use decisions that favor pollinators, we should do that.
We should do that. And I think that's a good place to wrap up our decision, our discussion rather. We're not making any decisions. We don't legislate on across the fence either, for better or for worse. I want to thank you both for being here. Thank you very much for talking to me about this. And Stephen, if people want to hear you talk some more, the University of Vermont Northwest Crops and Soils program is hosting a webinar on neonicotinoids. Visit their website for more details. And as always, you can go to the Agency of Agriculture website. The URL is on the screen, and learn more about this. My thanks to everyone here at WCAX who's behind the scenes, who makes this program possible. And as always, thank you for stopping by Across the Fence. Take care.